It was a loud and busy morning at the city airport. People rushed from gate to gate, dragging bags, talking on phones, and looking at their tickets. Among them stood a young boy named Jamal. He was only 17 years old, but his eyes looked older. He stood in line quietly, holding a small, worn-out backpack close to his chest. His shoes were old. His jeans had small tears. His jacket was too thin for the cold air in the airport. But Jamal didn't care. He had learned long ago not to let people's stares bother him. Still, deep inside, he always felt the weight of their silent judgment. As he got closer to the gate, a voice came from nearby. "Wow," the voice said loudly. "You sure you're in the right line? This plane isn't heading to the hood." People turned to look. Some gasped softly. Others stayed silent, pretending not to hear. The voice belonged to Captain Harris, a tall white pilot in a clean blue uniform with shining gold wings on his chest. He wore a smile, but it wasn't kind. It was the smile of someone who thought he was better than others. Jamal froze for a second. His heart beat faster. His face burned with shame. He looked at the floor. He didn't say a word. The woman in front of him turned slowly and gave him a soft look of pity. A man behind him cleared his throat uncomfortably. No one said anything to the pilot. A flight attendant standing near the gate saw everything. Her eyes met Jamal's for a brief second. She didn't say anything either, but her face showed she was not okay with what just happened. Jamal walked forward when it was his turn. He handed his ticket to the flight attendant, who smiled nervously and said, "Have a safe flight." Jamal nodded and stepped onto the plane. He didn't look back. Once inside, he walked to his seat near the window. He sat down quietly, pulled out his phone, and typed just 4 words. He did it again. He hit send. The message went straight to one contact: Mom. He didn't need to write more. His mother would understand. It wasn't the first time something like this had happened. As the passengers boarded, Jamal stared out the window, watching the luggage being loaded. Outside, Captain Harris stood near the plane, laughing with a ground worker, clearly in a good mood. He had no idea what that small moment at the gate had done to Jamal. Jamal leaned back in his seat and closed his eyes. He didn't cry. He didn't get angry. Not on the outside. But inside, a storm was building. He remembered what his mother always told him. Stay calm. Stay smart. Never let small minds shake your big dreams. Jamal had always listened, but now something felt different. Something inside him was tired. Tired of staying calm. Tired of being the one who had to stay quiet. Back at the gate, the flight attendant took a deep breath. She looked at the list of passengers, then at the captain's name. Her hands trembled slightly as she made a quiet note on her tablet. She didn't know who Jamal really was. Not yet. But soon, everyone would. The plane was full now. People were still settling in, buckling their seatbelts, putting away their bags. Flight attendants moved up and down the aisle, checking things. Everything looked normal, but something was different in the air. A strange silence followed Jamal as he sat near the window, row 14A. His face was calm, but his eyes were not. He kept looking straight, not talking, not moving much. The message he sent to his mother still hung in the air like a question. He did it again. Behind him, a middle-aged couple whispered softly. "Did you hear what the pilot said?" The woman asked, her voice low. "Yeah," the man replied. "Wasn't right at all. That boy didn't do anything." "But no one said anything," she said sadly. "Not even us." The man didn't answer. He just looked out his window, ashamed. A few seats ahead, a young girl, maybe Jamal's age, looked back at him. She had seen it too. Her eyes were full of questions. She wanted to say something, but words never came. Instead, she just watched him, wondering who he was, and why the pilot had said those words. In the cockpit, Captain Harris leaned back in his chair, relaxed. He was sipping coffee, joking with his co-pilot. People are too soft these days, he said. You can't even make a joke anymore. His co-pilot laughed nervously, clearly unsure if it was really funny. That kid looked like he didn't belong here, the captain added. I said what everybody else was thinking. But not everyone was thinking that. At the back of the plane, one of the flight attendants, her name was Maya, stood quietly by the service area. She held her tablet close to her chest. Her hands were shaking a little. She had seen what happened at the gate. She couldn't forget the way Jamal looked after the pilot's words. Like something inside him broke, but he didn't let it show. She opened the cabin log and wrote a short note about the incident. It wasn't much, just a simple report. But sometimes, even a small step matters. As the plane moved toward the runway, Jamal closed his eyes. He wasn't asleep, just thinking. He remembered something from 2 years ago. A different airport, a different city, another pilot. Same kind of words, same silence. And once again, he had done nothing, just walked on. But his mother had found out then too. And something had happened after that. Something serious. Jamal didn't know the full details. He was young back then. But he remembered the pilot lost his job. He remembered reporters calling their home. He remembered his mom's strong voice saying, "They won't touch you again, not while I'm breathing." The plane took off into the sky. Clouds passed by. The seatbelt sign blinked off. Next to Jamal, an elderly woman smiled at him. "You're very calm," she said kindly. "That was hard back there." Jamal looked at her and nodded. "It's not the first time." She frowned. "It shouldn't happen at all." He didn't answer, but her words felt warm. Not everyone was silent. Back on the ground, miles away, a woman stood in her home office, staring at her phone. Her name, Selena Moore. The message from her son was still open on the screen. He did it again. Her face was cold. Not angry, not emotional, just focused. She walked to her desk, pressed a button, and her personal assistant's face appeared on a screen. "Yes, Mom." Selena spoke just 3 words. "Pull the footage." The assistant nodded and got to work. A moment later, Selena picked up her phone again and made a call. A deep, serious voice answered on the first ring. "This is General Moore," she said calmly. "I need a report on United Flight 768. Departing 9:15 a.m., Terminal C." The voice on the other end replied quickly, "Understood, Mom." She hung up, then looked at the photo on her desk. It was Jamal, 10 years old, smiling with missing teeth, holding a toy plane. She whispered to herself, "You're not a target. You're a legacy. And I'm going to remind them of that." The flight was smooth. No bumps. No noise except the soft hum of the engine and a few quiet conversations here and there. Jamal sat by the window, his head leaning gently on the cool glass. He watched the clouds below, white and soft like pillows, floating in the sky. Everything outside looked peaceful. But inside him, everything felt heavy. He wasn't angry. He wasn't crying. He just felt tired. Tired of pretending it didn't matter. Tired of acting like words didn't hurt. Tired of people laughing, pointing, judging, just because of the color of his skin or the way he dressed. His phone buzzed once. A message from Mom. Just one word. Handled. That was all. No yelling. No questions. No long talk. Just that one word. But Jamal smiled a little, because he knew what it meant. When his mom said something was handled, it really was. She didn't play games. And she didn't forget. In the front of the plane, Captain Harris was sipping his second coffee. His hands were steady. His mind was calm. He had no idea what was coming. He didn't know who Jamal's mother was. He didn't know that a message had already traveled faster than his plane ever could. He didn't know the quiet storm waiting for him after landing. Flight attendant Maya walked slowly down the aisle, checking on passengers. When she reached Jamal, she stopped. "Everything okay?" she asked in a soft voice. Jamal looked up, surprised. "Yeah, thanks." She nodded and leaned closer. "I saw what happened earlier. I'm really sorry. That wasn't right." Jamal gave a small, tired smile. "I'm used to it. You shouldn't have to be," Maya said, her voice firmer now. "If you need anything during the flight, just let me know." He thanked her again. Then she walked away, but her face was no longer calm. Something had shifted. She wasn't just sad anymore. She was angry and determined. At the back of the plane, she stopped and took out her phone. She opened her private social account and typed a post. "Saw a young black teen humiliated by a pilot today in front of passengers. No reason. Just hate. Just power. Just wrong." His silence said everything. But this story won't stay quiet. She didn't post his name. She didn't share the airline or flight. But her words were strong. And soon, her message started moving, getting liked, shared, and whispered about online. The calm was cracking. Meanwhile, far away in a tall glass building in Washington, D.C., a special team was already working. General Selena Moore's command was clear: pull the flight footage, identify witnesses, and confirm pilot behavior. Selena wasn't just any mother. She was a respected military leader. She had friends in high places and enemies who never dared cross her twice. But most of all, she was a mother who had warned the world once before. And now, they forgot. In her home, she walked into her private study. She opened a black file with Jamal's name on the cover. Inside were photos, letters, and reports, all from past incidents. Not just one, not two. More than 5 times, her son had been treated badly in public places. Every time, it left a mark on her heart. She picked up one of the letters Jamal wrote her at age 12. The handwriting was messy, but the words were clear. "Mom, it's okay. I didn't say anything back. I know you'll protect me." Her hands tightened around the paper. This wasn't just about one pilot, or one airport, or one cruel joke. This was about her son's right to walk through this world with dignity. And now she was done being quiet. Back on the plane, Jamal opened his notebook. He started drawing. Something he hadn't done in months. It was a picture of a plane. But this time, it wasn't crashing. It was flying high, strong, free. The girl across the aisle noticed. "You draw?" she asked gently. Jamal nodded. "Only when I feel like I have to." She smiled. "You're really good." "Thanks," he said softly. It was a small moment, but it mattered. Not everyone stared in hate. Some saw the soul behind the silence. As the plane began its slow descent toward its destination, the clouds outside started to fade. The city below appeared, small buildings, cars, roads, all moving without knowing the story unfolding above them. The captain's voice came over the speaker, confident, calm. "Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be landing shortly. Thank you for flying with us." But this time, Jamal didn't just hear words. He heard something else behind them. A warning, a challenge, a lie. Because the story wasn't over. Not even close. The plane touched down with a soft thump. Wheels hit the runway, and passengers gently rocked in their seats. Outside, the sky was clear. The sun had started to set, painting the clouds orange and pink. From the outside, it looked like a perfect landing. But inside the plane, something else was landing too. As the plane rolled toward the gate, Captain Harris leaned back in his seat. He stretched his arms, cracked his neck, and smiled to himself. It had been a long flight, but quiet. No drama, no problems. He figured everyone had already forgotten what happened at the gate. He didn't know the cameras had caught everything. He didn't know someone had sent a message. He didn't know the powerful woman waiting just beyond the gate. Jamal stayed in his seat, calm as ever. He didn't rush to grab his bag. He waited, letting others move first. He looked out the window again, quiet and deep in thought. The girl from across the aisle leaned over. "Hey," she said. "You okay?" Jamal nodded. "Yeah, just waiting." She gave him a small smile. "I saw what he said at the gate. That wasn't right." "I know," Jamal said softly. "It never is." She looked like she wanted to say more, but just nodded and stood up. Her parents were calling her. In the front cabin, flight attendant Maya stood stiff near the cockpit door. Her face was serious now. She hadn't smiled once since takeoff. Her phone had buzzed 3 times during the flight, each message more shocking than the last. She had just received a screenshot. It was a government security alert. "Prepare for VIP retrieval. Witness briefing required upon landing." She read the name on the file. Selena Moore. Her eyes widened. She looked back down the aisle at Jamal, and everything made sense. The line to exit the plane moved slowly. Tired passengers, sleepy kids, bags bumping into each other. Captain Harris stepped out of the cockpit to do his usual polite goodbye. "Thanks for flying. Take care. Enjoy your stay." His smile was back. His charm was back. His mask was back. But it was about to be ripped off. Jamal stood now, calm, holding his old backpack. He walked slowly up the aisle, step by step. Every step felt heavy, but he didn't show it. When he reached the front, he stood face to face with the pilot. Captain Harris gave a fake smile. "Hey, kid. Made it after all." Jamal didn't respond. He just looked at him, and then walked past. That silence said everything. But the moment Jamal stepped off the plane, everything changed. 2 tall men in dark suits stood near the jet bridge. Behind them, a woman in a clean military uniform, strong posture, sharp eyes, a powerful calm on her face. General Selena Moore. Jamal stepped forward, and for the first time, his eyes lit up. "Hi, Mom." She smiled. Not big, just enough. "You okay?" she asked. He nodded. She looked at the agents beside her. "Secure the footage. Escort the captain off the plane. Now." The men moved instantly. Back inside, Captain Harris's smile vanished as 2 agents stepped into the plane. "Captain Harris," one said. "Yes. You need to come with us." His face twisted in confusion. "Why? What's going on?" Maya watched from the side, her heart pounding. But she didn't say a word. "This way, sir," one agent said again. Passengers still waiting to leave stared in shock. Some started recording with their phones. "Is he getting arrested? What did he do? Who was that boy?" Outside, Jamal stood next to his mother. A black car waited for them just beyond the door. "Do you want to go home or go with me to the press room?" she asked. Jamal looked at the sky for a moment, thinking. Then he said, "Let's go talk." Selena nodded. As they got into the car, Maya walked off the plane and saw them leave. Her phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't a message. It was a live news update. Breaking. Military general confronts airline over racial discrimination. Teen involved identified as her son. The headlines spread fast. Across phones, across cities, across countries. People didn't know the full story yet, but they were about to. And no one, not even the captain, was ready for what came next. The black car pulled into a secured building deep in the city center. It didn't stop at the front. It went through a side entrance, away from flashing lights and loud cameras. The hallway was quiet, but that wouldn't last long. Jamal sat beside his mother, holding his backpack tightly. His hands were calm, but his eyes were sharp. He was no longer just a teen who got humiliated. Now he was part of something bigger, and the world had started to watch. General Selena Moore walked beside him, firm and steady in her step. Her medals shone under the hallway lights. Every guard they passed stood straighter when they saw her. They all knew who she was. She wasn't just any mother. She was a war hero, a leader, a woman who had once stopped a foreign conflict with only words and a stare. Inside the press room, the buzz was loud. Reporters were already setting up cameras. Screens flashed headlines. Microphones were fixed. Chairs were full. One headline read, "Who is Selena Moore? General, mother, now a fighter for justice." Another said, "Airline in crisis. Pilot accused of racial abuse toward U.S. hero's son." The room went silent the moment Selena and Jamal entered. She didn't speak right away. She stood behind the podium, looked around slowly, and placed a single photo in front of her. It was a photo of Jamal, age 10, standing in a military hospital beside his mom. He was holding her hand. Her arm had been in a sling. Her face had stitches, but she was smiling. Selena touched the picture gently. "This," she said, "is my son." The cameras clicked wildly. She continued, her voice calm but full of emotion. "Yesterday, my son was mocked at an airport by a man who wears the same uniform I once trusted. A man who judged my boy based on his skin, not his soul." She paused. "I've flown into war zones. I've led rescue teams into enemy fire. I've shaken hands with world leaders. But none of it, none, prepared me for the pain I felt when I saw the video of that man mocking my son." The room was frozen. No parent should ever feel that. No child should be made to shrink because of someone else's hate. Reporters began to raise hands, but Selena held hers up. "I'll answer questions. But first, you need to know something else." She nodded to a guard, who dimmed the lights. A video played on a big screen behind her. It showed the airport gate, Jamal standing in line, Captain Harris laughing, saying, "You sure you're in the right line? This plane isn't heading to the hood." Gasps filled the room. Some reporters covered their mouths. The video kept playing. Jamal's face, his silence, his eyes. Then the text message. He did it again. The screen froze. Selena stepped back to the mic. That message was not the first one. She pulled out her phone and read, "Mom, it happened again today. Another one made fun of my name at the counter. They stared at me like I didn't belong." Tears welled in some eyes across the room. Selena's voice grew stronger. "My son is not weak. He is strong. But even the strongest need to be protected. It's time we stop letting this kind of hate fly freely in our skies." Reporters now raised their hands like wildfire. One stood up. "General Moore, will you press charges?" Selena answered clearly, "We are reviewing legal action. But more than that, we want change. Not just apologies. Not just silence. Real training. Real awareness. Real respect." Another asked, "Did the airline respond?" She nodded. "Their leadership has called me. They want to meet. But this time, they will listen. And the world will watch." Jamal stood silently beside her. Not as a victim, but as a symbol. Another reporter raised a hand. "Jamal, do you want to say anything?" Jamal stepped forward, slowly. He looked at the sea of cameras and lights. Then, with simple, steady words, he said, "I didn't ask for any of this. I just wanted to fly like everyone else. But if my silence makes someone else feel small, I won't be silent anymore." He looked at his mother. "Thanks for showing me how to stand." Selena placed a hand on his shoulder, and the press room erupted. Not in noise, but in respect. One reporter stood, then another, then another. Soon, the entire room was standing in silence, like a quiet salute. And as the mother and son walked off the stage, the story wasn't just about an insult anymore. It was about what happens next. The next morning, the world had already changed. News channels replayed the press conference over and over. Clips of Jamal's quiet words and General Selena Moore's powerful speech were everywhere, from TV screens in living rooms to phone screens on buses. Some cried watching it. Some grew angry. And some stayed silent. But the one voice still missing was Captain Harris. Where was he? Why wasn't he speaking? The airline had released a short statement. "We are investigating. The pilot involved has been placed on leave." That only made people angrier. To many, it felt too soft, too late. Jamal sat at home that day, beside his mother. He didn't go to school. Reporters were outside the house, waiting for any sign of them. His phone buzzed with messages. Most were kind. Some weren't. But one message stood out. It was from a woman named Eva, a flight attendant, the same one who had seen everything at the airport. Her message was short. "I'm ready to speak. Meet me." Jamal showed the message to his mom. She read it once, then nodded. "Let's go," she said. They met Eva in a quiet park, far from cameras. She wore sunglasses and looked nervous. Her voice shook when she spoke. "I've seen him do it before," she said. "Captain Harris. That wasn't the first time." Selina listened carefully. "Go on." Eva took a deep breath. "He's made jokes like that for years, about people's names, clothes, accents. He hides it behind humor, but it's not funny. And it's always aimed at people who don't look like him." Jamal looked away. The words weren't surprising, but they still hurt. Eva wiped her eyes. "I'm sorry I didn't speak up earlier. I froze that day at the gate, but I want to fix it now." Selina nodded. "Then come with me. Tell your story, not to a camera, to the people who can make change." Later that day, the airline called a press conference of their own. Everyone expected a clean, rehearsed apology, but nobody knew if Captain Harris would show up. The room was packed. Reporters, activists, even airline staff. Then, he walked in. Captain Harris. His face was tight. No smile. He wore his pilot uniform, clean and pressed. His hair was perfect, but something in his eyes looked unsure. He stepped to the microphone. The room held its breath. "I want to say something," he began. "To Jamal, to General Moore, and to everyone watching." He paused. "My words at the airport were taken the wrong way. I was joking. Maybe it was a bad joke. I didn't mean harm." Gasps. Whispers. Jamal watched from a screen backstage. His heart sank. Captain Harris went on. "I didn't realize the boy was someone important. I didn't know who his mother was." Selina clenched her fists. The room began to shift. And then, a voice called out from the back. "Would you have apologized if she wasn't a general?" It was Eva. Everyone turned. She stepped forward, pulled off her sunglasses, and faced him. "I was there. I work with you. And I'm not staying silent anymore." Captain Harris froze. Eva faced the cameras. "He's done it before. Many times. And no, it wasn't a joke. It was hate with a smile." Reporters exploded with questions. Captain Harris stammered. "That's not true. I didn't mean it." Eva raised her voice. "Then why do we all walk on eggshells around you? Why do we whisper about your jokes in the break room? Why is everyone afraid to say something?" Now he looked smaller. The proud pilot, now cornered by truth. Selina stood at the edge of the stage, calm, watching. Then she stepped up beside Eva. She didn't need to raise her voice. She simply said, "The world doesn't need a perfect apology. We just need a real one." She looked at Harris. "Do you have one now?" Captain Harris finally looked at Jamal's photo, printed in front of the press. The image of the boy standing silently, carrying all that pain. He lowered his eyes. "I'm sorry," he said, but the words were weak, too late. Selina spoke again. "We'll see what the courts say, and what the public thinks. But this is not where our story ends." The cameras clicked. Reporters rushed to file their breaking stories. But Jamal, watching from backstage, said nothing. He simply stood and walked away. 3 weeks later, the courtroom was full. Not just with lawyers and witnesses, but with something heavier. A quiet, burning hope. People came from different cities just to sit on the benches and watch. Teachers brought students. Parents held their children close. Many had never been inside a courtroom before, but they were here for Jamal. At the front of the courtroom stood a tall wooden bench. Behind it sat Judge Thomas, a man known for fairness and silence. He had seen a lot in his years, but this case had the eyes of a nation on it. Jamal sat in the witness chair. He wore a clean shirt and slacks. Still simple, still real. His voice shook a little as he told his side of the story, but he didn't cry. He didn't yell. He just told the truth. He looked at me like I was less than human, Jamal said softly. And when he joked, people laughed. But I didn't, because that joke has followed people like me our whole lives. The courtroom stayed silent. No sound, not even a cough. Then Selina Moore stood. She wore her uniform, medals shining, but her strength came not from her clothes, but from her voice. I raised my son to believe in this country, to believe in fairness, that if he followed the rules, worked hard, and stayed kind, he'd be respected. She turned and looked directly at Captain Harris. But that day, you tried to break something in him. You didn't just insult my son. You insulted every mother who tells her child to believe in justice. Captain Harris sat with his lawyer, pale, eyes red. His hands were locked tight in front of him. This time, there were no jokes. Then Eva, the flight attendant, took the stand, and she confirmed everything. The past comments, the cruel laughs, the silence from others. I stayed quiet because I didn't want to lose my job, she said. But I realized the truth is more important than fear. One by one, more employees came forward. Slowly, quietly, like people stepping out of a dark tunnel. Together, they painted a picture that was hard to ignore. The judge listened. He didn't rush. Finally, after a long pause, he spoke. What we have here is not just a moment. It is a mirror, a reflection of what many people feel every day and are told to ignore. He looked at Harris. You use your position to humiliate someone. And this court finds that your actions were not only inappropriate, they were rooted in bias, and they caused lasting harm. Gasps filled the room. The judge continued, you are to be removed from your position. You will not fly again. And the airline is ordered to publicly apologize, retrain all staff, and fund programs in underserved schools for 5 years. The courtroom erupted in quiet claps. Some cried, some hugged, but Jamal, he just sat there. Quiet, strong, still. Selina touched his shoulder. You did it, she whispered. But Jamal shook his head. We did. Outside the courtroom, cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions. Jamal, how do you feel? What will you do next? But Jamal smiled and said just one thing. I'm going to school tomorrow. I've got a math test. Laughter rippled through the crowd. A few days later, a national magazine published a cover story. From Hurt to Hero, the boy who stood tall. And beside Jamal's picture was one of Selina Moore. Smiling, proud, a mother, a general, a symbol.